Right, it's now past, so I shall start the meeting. Welcome to the November 2023 meeting of the Exmoor National Park Authority Governance Committee. I'm Claire Reid, Head of Strategy and Performance, and the first item on the agenda today is to elect a chairperson of the Standards Committee for the next 12 months. Do I have a Stephen?
Patricia Beadles.
Yes, that'd be seconded. Yeah, thank you. Are there any other nominations? No, I only have one name put forward. So please could I ask for a show of hands to confirm that you consent to their appointment as the position of chairperson of the Standards Committee? I believe that is confirmed. Thank you, John.
The next item is the election of deputy chair. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Mr. Pugsley, please. You willing to stand? Yeah.
Any other nominations? One nomination. Thank you. Hands, please. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We'll never contact. And apologies for absence. None. So, minutes of 2nd of May 2023. You have a copy. Would someone like to move a true and fair record? Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Seconded by Evelyn. Thank you. All those in favour? Not present. So. Any matters arising from those minutes? So I'll briefly go through them point by point. 11 minutes, item 12, annual governance review. And that's it. Okay, just things arising. Which brings us to the review of standing orders, which I head over today. I think things.
Thank you. So members, this is in response to the decisions that were taken at authority earlier on in the month. And as you know, that requires some changes to the standing orders. Andrew, do you want to run through the changes? Or should we do that between us? Yeah. Okay. So the key issue obviously is the change to having a smaller and separate planning committee, and that has required some changes to the planning orders to reflect that. I guess members have seen those changes. So really, it's just to see if you have any comments or questions or any. We do have a couple of additional points that we need to verbally report to you, and I think Judy has got them on a slide showing you that now of additional decisions that were taken at the authority meeting.
And there's a reduction of the number of authority meetings.
Yes, and the number of pension.
I'm seeing no.
Oh, thank you.
You just never open the two documents. Come on.
Okay. One of the additional changes that was requested at authority was that we include some wording around the allowance for substitute members. And so that is the proposal there, that we have wording: a substitute member will be permitted to attend where a member appointed to the planning committee cannot attend, providing the substitute member has undergone the programme of training in the planning system that's required. So that's point one. Point two is that we feel when we were developing, preparing this, that actually it would be helpful to have notice of that. And so we've got some suggested additional wording that the appointed member would be required to provide notice to the chief executive at least 10 working days before the committee meeting say for exceptional circumstances, for example, to cover emergencies or so. So, for example, if you're on holiday, you know in advance, you can notify the chief executive if you're ill and unwell, unable to attend. Then, assuming that the member who is substituting has had time to read the papers and has the training, then that would be as well.
There was talk at the meeting as well then about whether the person who needed a substitute was duty bound to find their substitute. That's not mentioned here.
I think we've left that open because
But is it for the chief executive to notify someone or ask for a replacement, or is it for the member who
I
can't
think
come?
it's for a member who can't come.
And is that explicit in here? Because that could cause confusion if we haven't documented what the requirement is.
I mean, I'm just reading it for the first time.
Yeah.
I mean, it suggested additional wording says the appointed member will be required to provide notice to the chief exec at least 10 days in advance. So the appointed member, there is the person that is substituting. Does that not mean the person that cannot be there? The apologies. You saying I can't?
No, I think it's the appointed member is the member appointed to the planning committee, as in
Okay.
The actual member.
the actual member.
But there's nothing there about how the substitute is then pulled in. And I think we need to be much more.
So the word is that the member appointed to the planning committee will be required to identify the substitute and provide notice to the chief executive. I think that would address your point there.
Yeah, something like that.
We'll
Make it a requirement rather than may.
well, no, because they don't have to have a substitute. I think that's the point, is that they don't have to.
Required to. It's very strong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew, you're the wording expert. You come up with the wording.
I suppose it's
Should.
a member who is unable to attend is entitled to appoint a substitute.
Yes.
Which will probably answer your question.
I can't say anything. I don't remember belong to this committee.
No, I was just looking at you, thinking about the general.
I know that in the local authorities what happens is because the planning committee there has to be politically balanced according to regulation, the individual political groups say one of ours can't turn up, so you're the one that's been appointed in our group, so you can turn up instead. But we don't have an equivalent
The group leader would normally do it under those circumstances.
It's end up certain things as well, anyway.
I think it's dangerous to expect that a member says, I'm not coming. And in that case, the officers appoint who the substitute is going to be. Because particularly in planning terms, I suspect that could be seen externally, reputationally, as trying to gerrymander the committee. And you could say, well, equally, if a member can't come and he or she is finding their own substitute, that might be something similar. But I think there's less of a reputational risk there. What I was going to say, though, is that, as you all know, Mr. Chairman, because we've discussed it, there was a concern that actually, if a member couldn't attend, somebody else who was from the same category of either Secretary of State or Parish or North Devon or Somerset members, their substitute should come from those categories. But actually this, if the person that isn't able to attend is the person that has to initiate the substitution, that really then means that they can go to somebody from their category in order to get the substitute. So whilst it's not written into the standing orders, practically speaking, it enables them to do that.
Yeah, I think that was the purpose of doing it that way, because otherwise it becomes
I
quite
can understand
complicated. And this is only an option; it's not a requirement. As long as the committee is still for it, you don't have to have substitutes. But there is a provision for that to happen if members so wish. So I think that was the point, was to keep it simple. Otherwise, we tie ourselves up.
And if I may just finish that, then particularly if you've got a relatively small cadre, so the North Devon members, or indeed the Devon County Council members, if a North Devon member can't attend, and the other North Devon member can't attend, at least it means then that they can
Yes,
go out to.
Exactly. Wider.
Yes.
I suppose the requirement should be to let the authority know at least 10 days before if you know you're not going to be there.
Yeah.
So that then arrangements can be made. But if 5 people 2 days before say I can't make it, then we haven't got a committee. So to me, I mean, we were worried, weren't we? Because such a much smaller number, we might, with wastage, could be more of a problem for my recall. So if you have to, if you're required to say 10 days, if you're aware of it, then it gives time for the subject to be.
You've still got the exceptional circumstance, but if you.
Yeah.
But it would make life a lot easier, I think, making sure you've got a core 8
Yeah.
planning committee if you had 10, you were required to let somebody know 10 so that then all arrangements can be made.
My point was just to make sure who was contacting the substitute. And it's the person.
So there is just that last point I think
Yes.
needs.
so the last point was about how long would be considered to be suitable or for exceptional circumstances. Perhaps 24 hours notice being sufficient to allow a member to read and understand the matters to be discussed. So the meeting has to be, has to be published at least 5 working days prior.
My query is that too close? Should it be longer, given papers are published 5 working days before? Is 24 hours enough for someone to absorb 4 or 5 applications? That's what I was thinking. Maybe it needed to be more.
What members, I wasn't sure. It's difficult in this is only talking about those exceptional circumstances,
Yeah.
which are likely to be
Yes.
quite close to the meeting, aren't they? So
Yeah.
are you comfortable with it being 24 hours?
48 hours.
Yeah.
Tricky.
Most of us get phone up on stuff.
The trouble is, if it's an illness, you may not know. until
No.
10 hours
Yeah.
before.
And
I guess the reason of wanting a substitute that is perhaps from the same constituent authority, there may be just one item that they're particularly keen on representation for, so it may not be all items anyway.
Yes.
Could always abstain from voting if they felt they hadn't had.
I've got to say, I think that the regulations requiring planning committees to be politically balanced are pretty bonkers, really, because that kind of assumes that everybody's a political party will have to start, which is quite against the law. Because it assumes you predetermined it because your other party members have as well, which is just not nice. See,
just coming back to.
we can't do something.
What I think I would say to Judy is that I would hope that all members continue to be interested in all planning applications and that they will all be looking at the paperwork anyway, whether or not they're a member of the planning committee or not. Just as I would have expected all members to have looked at these standards papers,
Exactly.
because they should be fully engaged there. I mean, and it is a serious question. I think everybody who might be a substitute, and that could be everybody, needs to be planning trained, and they should be aware of the fact that they should have some understanding and knowledge of what the planning papers are, so that should they have to be substituted, they can act. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say you do need to make sure that you've read the planning papers and you understand what the cases are.
I think that's fair enough.
So,
That's one. Are we okay to move on to the next one then? Do we want to just confirm that we are, sorry, going back to the one before, just for the purposes of the notes to help, that we are,
are we content with the wording on the screen?
with the changes that we proposed in terms of the being clear who it is,
Yeah.
who's responsible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and Andrew will provide the suitable wording for that. Thank you. So the other point was about members who are not on the planning committee, having being able to attend to talk about an application if it's an application from their hatch, as it were. And so this is again some additional wording that hopefully will enable that to happen. Do you want me to read it out?
That should say local division or ward.
No, I can't be.
Well, and also
There's a problem. I can see if there is a problem.
I think at the chairman's discretion, you have the right.
Things and remembered because they were the patch.
Is everybody content to?
Yes.
To send
Sorry.
standing orders and allow the member of the public to speak?
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
So I think that where this come from is because I gave you an example in the meeting. But I think by doing this, we're disenfranchising Secretary of State members who don't have a patch. We represent the whole area. So we may well have an opinion about something that's to do with landscape, for example, that might be miles away from where I represent. And I think that's even more pertinent for a Secretary of State member, that they may well want to attend to make a point about something that would particularly about landscape or maybe historical environments.
Should we reinstate standing orders?
Yes, I have.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say, does it, C says that you can, if you're not a member, you can
Speak.
attend with the chairman's discretion, so it's offered a standing order. No, I was just going to say that I take the member of the authorities point, and all we would have to do is to delete and which affects their electoral division.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Just cut that bit out.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. That's much better.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments about this?
No.
No. Fine. Can we move on to the?
Oh, yes.
Should we start?
Sorry. I also asked it would made an approved duty, so nobody feels they can't possibly come and speak because they can't afford it. Because
Yeah, travel.
So-
It's basically about the travel expenses
it's a travel expenses, yeah.
and any care expenses.
Yeah. It's all that sort of
If
stuff,
it
yeah.
occurs on a day when there isn't
They
an
won't be
authority
there.
meeting.
Yeah.
It is in, obviously the member allowances, but we can maybe make specific reference when Ben sends it next March.
Yeah.
To,
Yeah.
follow that there.
That was all my points.
That's fine.
Sorry.
Any standing orders, members, okay? Are there two sides?
Those are the two slides, yes. So it's if there are any other questions or queries over the proposed changes.
I have some. The first members, any?
No.
Any points you'd like to ask?
No.
On page 14, it talks about quorums of committees, subcommittees generally, and it says that in no case shall the quorum of a committee or subcommittee be fewer than 3 members to include at least one local authority member of the authority and at least one member appointed by a Secretary of State. Why the at least 1 and 1 rule? Does that come from some regulation or
That's the regulation.
is it?
Yeah.
So you can't get rid of it, irrespective of sense. Oh, by the way, I should have asked beforehand. Some occasional words are highlighted in yellow, and is that
Yes.
just a?
That was another query. No, it's in there at the moment, and we think we can just delete them. But we just want to check them.
Yeah,
So like from 2012.
yeah, I think that's first came in.
It's when they first came in, but it's just been carried through, but we feel we can delete them. So if you're happy to do that, we will just delete them.
And that was my next point, actually, 19.3, about the chairman and deputy chairman of each standing committee, blah, 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 but not more than 6 consecutive years. Is that part of regulations? Or is that something we've made up necessarily?
That's our own local.
It's local
Just to stop someone.
and it's healthy.
Until I became chairman, the chairman could continue for more than a second.
Yeah.
And we said at the time, well, I think we said 7 years, but preferably 6. Otherwise, you just potentially you could get somebody that won't move.
Well, charities have between 4 and 6 years usually. 10 years.
I was just wondering whether it was set in statute somewhere.
For local.
It's custom in practice now.
Yeah.
My final point is about member conduct and interests. So in paragraph 5.4 on page 6, it talks about declaring interests. And giving that something, although it's not somewhat but descriptions of people personal interests. And on page 14, it talks about conducting meetings. Now, my concern is really that members may not always act to the high standard we would expect. As an example, like the meeting last week, a member extended an interest in having social media posts on the subject under discussion, and decided that it was a personal interest and therefore stayed and voted. My concern is that I'm talking now. My concern is that he didn't fully understand what he was doing, and that he should perhaps more properly withdrawn from the meeting because of the nature of the posts he'd made on social media, which implied that there were other motives behind the decision being recommended by officers, which I think can be improper and also undermine the confidence that we ought to place in our officers. And I was just hoping that the solicitor and the independent person might be able to comment on what their views on that might be.
Well, we've both had a look at this. You go first, Andrew. You're the technical.
Well, in terms of the interest, that's up to members to declare interest if they see, of course. From discussions we were having, the interest that's probably of most relevance is the fact that he's on the town council as well, and that probably should have been declared, because that would show why he's coming from the point of view he's coming from. But when he was making the posts, that just shows predisposition. The angle that I was concerned about was whether it shows predetermination. I don't think it does. It just shows predisposition, which is entitled to have. All members are entitled to have their views, as long as they approach the decision making with an open mind. So I have it was flagged to me beforehand, and I've flagged to Nick that he needs to just be mindful of predisposition and predetermination, and I've pointed towards the code of conduct to say, just be clear about the interest you have.
Because the code of conduct in the very first paragraph talks about when the code applies, and it says this includes meetings in written or verbal communications and in electronic and social media communications.
Yeah.
So, in your view, has it reached that?
No, I don't think it has.
And it was flagged up to me at the same time as the independent person, and I'm not entirely convinced that the code of conduct prevents you from having made up your mind about a decision that the authority is going to take, except in the case of a planning decision, when you're not allowed to have made up your mind firmly beforehand. When it's simply a decision that the authority is going to take, you may all have discussed it in members' forum beforehand. You may have already all come to your opinions about various things, and you may go into a meeting very strongly minded to have a point of view which you're free to put forward and try and persuade other people, but you must also listen to everybody else and not have completely predetermined. But you can go into a meeting having expressed an opinion that you think this is what ought to happen. The issue is partly about social media and how you treat that. And when I had a look at the thread, which was on Dulverton Community on Facebook, and we have a very similar thread for High Bickington community, and I'm sure all of you have similar things in your villages. You hear about what's going on and you discuss stuff in the village. And Nick was on that as Nick Thwaites, not as Councillor Nick Thwaites, Dulverton Town Council, or as Exmoor National Park Authority Nick Thwaites. So there is an issue that he was behaving as himself, perhaps, but was expressing views which were quite strong. They were teetering on quite strong views, but other people on the thread were expressing very strong views. And so there is an issue about whether Nick was endorsing other views which were, in a sense, detrimental to the reputation of Exmoor National Park Authority, or were denigrating the way that Exmoor National Park Authority staff make decisions and whether there was a hidden agenda going on. We had this discussion some long time ago at an Exmoor National Park meeting where Robin Milton, who was chairman at the time, was very keen to reassure a member of the public that there wasn't some sort of dark meeting going on when you went into the members' forum, you know, that you were actually making decisions in public. And the questions, to a certain extent, is, Nick did all this before you made the decision at the meeting. Having made a decision at the meeting, you could argue that there's a collective responsibility and therefore he probably shouldn't be commenting anymore. But Richard Partington, who started this bit of the thread, is actually an ex-member of staff of Exmoor National. He was the head of tourism or something, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yes, which I'm sure Stephen's probably old enough to remember.
Well, he worked for Natural England.
So there may have been a view that he was expressing some sort of Richard Partington had special knowledge of this. And then Nick files in, and then Exmoor National Park itself files in. So you've got three things going on that could reflect on the park. And as members, you need to be very careful that you're not insulting the staff or the integrity of the national park and the way it makes decisions, which was the sort of concern that I had. I've also had the suggestion, and Stephen and I had a discussion in the car park afterwards, actually. We went out to the car park. It was really important to have a discussion at the meeting last week about the closure or the relocation of the closure of some of the units and the relocation of the Delverton one. And not only is it important not to have sort of groupthink and that you've got different opinions coming up, because otherwise there's no point in having lots of you on the committee, but also that you're seen in public to have aired these views. So from my point of view as the independent member, my thought was, independent person, not independent member, was that Nick should have made it clear at the meeting, perhaps, that he had, you know, as a member of Delverton Town Council, been commenting on this publicly, and that was his personal interest in it, because the public don't understand what the difference between a prejudicial interest and personal interest is anyway. When you're declaring them, it would be extremely helpful if you as members declared what that actual interest is. You know, it's my mum's farm, or something, and therefore I would have to leave the room. And I don't think Nick was behaving, it didn't appear from the thread that he was behaving either as Delverton Town Council on their behalf or as Exmoor National Park Authority. However, some of the thread was critical of Exmoor National Park as an organisation.
Stephen.
At which point I think I absolutely think. So arising from that point Mr. Ricklesworth has just made, is I think it is helpful for members to say, I have been party to be transparent about it. I've been party to discussions. I have not predetermined myself on this issue. Nevertheless, my predisposition is out there. And for members to understand the distinction, I think is helpful. But actually to say transparently at the beginning, this is the case. But the other point comes back to training, and perhaps we do need to revisit the question of member training when it comes to using social media, and also that in general, expressing views that might be fairly strong about a potential decision that the park might have to take is, I think, perfectly legitimate. But what you can't do is to criticise members of staff and to lay yourself open to complaint of prejudicial action. So I think a little bit of training just to make sure that members, particularly when they're using social media, has been refreshed. I think that would be very helpful if it would be possible to arrange that.
I agree, and I think that perhaps the code of conduct could be refreshed a bit to stress the social media points, because it's a bit, isn't it? You go on some social media, it's just everybody sharing to each other to pieces. Even was good.
Yeah, I felt very disquieted at the meeting because we've all declared interest and one tends to then not speak. Or at least if you remain in the room, you listen, but you don't try to, you've already made your views clear maybe, and you don't try to influence people. What I found very difficult was that he immediately tried to pass an asked us to look at an alternative motion, which would have overturned the, which was it was quite ridiculous, but also for someone who declared an interest, it just seemed to be completely out of order. And it's what the public's perception of this is. And, that would not have looked good at all to the public. I was very concerned.
The issue, one of the issues I have with this is that you've got a member of the authority who actually is probably the expert on how this might affect Dulverton Town Centre.
Yeah.
And as a member of the town council, he has specialist inside knowledge about what the concerns in the town centre are. And if we were to require him to leave the meeting and not take part in the discussion at all, you've actually lost an enormous amount of expertise from the debate. Mm-hmm. So perhaps he should have been able to put forward why he thought things. Nobody would want to discourage that.
I was going to say, there's no reason. The only reason to leave the meeting is if you've got a pecuniary interest.
Yes.
And it's called pecuniary
But it's how you're going to influence everyone without actually logic. That was
But part of the debate is so that you can try to influence your fellow members and put forward your viewpoints, which also brings into you can put forward
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's a point of order. I'm really sorry to say this, but this is a public meeting, which is actually being recorded. We're spending a lot of time talking about an individual. And I think it's a bit unfair if we focus too much on him. He's not here. He can't respond to it. And people out there can watch it.
I'm talking
Sorry.
principle. I have always had to take a step outside the room if Wimbledon Lake was discussed, because people believe that I was trying to influence debate. I haven't worked for South West Lakes Trust for 9 years, but if the item is controversial, I would step away, whatever my view was, because it's what people's perception.
From my point of view, I don't live in Dulverton, I don't come but I understood he was a member of the town council because he had a special interest, and therefore I heard what he said in that light. But I think it's important that I heard what he had to say. I don't do social media. I don't do Facebook, I must admit, because I get this confused. So therefore, I only got my information from him at that meeting. And I think it was important I heard what he had to say, because he lives in Dulverton, he's a member of the town council. Who else was going to represent that view directly, or his view? So
I think the point underlying all this is that social media is something that needs to be more better handled by members, and not just members of the national park, members across the country.
And this is that's how it should be done in a meeting where you understand where somebody's coming from, not having to, knowing you've seen what you've written on Facebook, which I obviously wouldn't know.
That's been just come up here. That's just an example. It's a general principle, but.
And we've had the same problem then, even with our parish council, we've had to bring in a social media standard because people were going on, councillors would go onto the Facebook page and they start saying things as almost as a councillor, and then it was reflecting back on the council. So I think you need to be very sort of strict and clear about exactly what members of the authority should and shouldn't do on social media.
That's right. Then you make all I was going to say. Didn't Andrew go first?
I was going to say, a general point, it's social media is a minefield,
Mhm.
so there should be some training about it. Nick makes a good point that members aren't necessarily when they're commenting as an authority member or as a member of any other group. They may be commenting on their own as a private individual. The thing to be that I would suggest members are careful of, though, is what their profile says. Because if their profile says, I'll take myself as an example. I'm Andrew Gendel, I'm a councillor, I'm a member, I'm not any of these things.
Yeah.
I'm Andrew Gendel. Then if I then start making comments, it's reasonable for the public to think that I'm making those statements as a councillor. So that's where there's a nuance of who has to be careful. I would say, if anybody's not sure, there are a number of us here that you can seek guidance from ahead of a meeting as to what to say if you think they must declare an interest. I think the last point is I don't think it's right that anybody's critical staff officers are there to try to assist the authority to come to the best decision they can. So those my
All I was going to say, I agree 100% with Mr. Kirkley in as much as we all need training.
Yeah.
It's all right complaining about various members doing. Do they know what they're doing? And I think there's a great deal of lacking in training given to individual people. It's apparently this declarations of interest is a minefield. We have it with the parish councils, we have it with the county councils, district councils, and everything else. And it is a minefield. We do need training, and once you've given the training, if someone steps out of line, you can jump on them.
Well, to a certain extent. As far as the law allows.
you can give them some guidance as to how to not come together.
Training.
So, I mean, the impression I get is that we all agree that there needs to be perhaps tell me if I'm wrong, something specific, more specific about social media in the code of conduct, and that we're referring to members about how they should comport themselves as they get in front of people.
And I think if when Andrew's doing standards training, if as well as planning training, when there are legal constraints on what you can say and do, in standards training, you point out quite strongly that it's what the public might think the authority is saying and doing and meaning, and that we need to be very careful that if you're appearing as a member of the authority, you know, you're sure if you're speaking on behalf of the authority that you actually have the authority to do that. You know, that this is the line that the authority has chosen. So you talk to a member of staff first, probably.
Yeah, remember needs to be clear that predisposition and predetermination applies to all decisions,
Yes.
not just planning decisions.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just that's where the big risk is.
Sorry.
Any more points, members? Standing orders, I mean, generally.
No.
Well, we have a recommendation in front of us to agree the proposed amendments, subject to the additional points.
Yeah.
And the scheme delegation, and it should be presented to authority next April.
No, sorry, it's presented to the authority, so it will be implemented by April, so we may bring it.
Oh, yeah. I seem to have skipped out some words.
That's
Should be presented to the full authority for adoption by April 2024, subject to any changes agreed by the committee. Do I have somebody? Thank you, Mike. Seconded. Thank you. And those in favour? That's unanimous. Unanimous. Overview of complaints and compliments.
Thank you. So you have the paper in front of you. There's not a lot to report, which is, you know, certainly good in terms of the complaints we do have. We have had stage 1 and 2 complaints. As you know, we run a process whereby when a complaint initially comes in, we'll treat it as an informal complaint, start with, and the relevant officer will deal with that. unless somebody specifies that they wish to be dealt with as a formal complaint. If they're not dealt with satisfactory to the satisfaction of the complainant, then they have the right to come back to follow up, and that's what I report here. So the stage 1 complaints are dealt with by the relevant manager or head of section, and then if that still isn't sufficient, then the stage 2 complaint is either dealt with myself or the chief executive. So we in effect we have 3 complaints. The 4th one was withdrawn, but 2 in relation to planning. That's in effect the same complainant, and 1 in relation to the condition of the toilets. And in my report here, in terms of one of the planning complaints, the first stage was partially upheld, and then the stage 2 was not, because an apology had already been issued in terms of the relevant aspect of the complaint, and certainly in terms of the condition of the toilets, the complaint was upheld, and again apology issued. And then just to say, on the other side of things, in terms of compliments, we still are receiving a nice level of compliments from across the range of the services. So it's always good just to reflect that. So.
Thanks, Claire. Well, it's good to see that there's so few complaints and there's none of them referred to the Ombudsman. Members. Stephen.
You and I, Mr. Chairman, were made aware of particular concerns, and I think it must be in relation to the second complaint that listed here. And I was just wondering if there's any further information that we have or need to know regarding that at this stage.
Not that we're aware of at this stage. Obviously, the the responses that go back in terms of any formal complaints, we do notify people that may have the right to build the Ombudsman if they so wish. So,
and that's the stage it's at.
Yeah. So we've stage 2 is our final stage. Yeah. So once a response goes back, that is as far as we would take it, and then people can make recourse to the Ombudsman if they wish. And I'm not aware of anything in relation to that at the moment. Obviously, if it does come, then we will report to you next time.
When was the last time you had an Ombudsman complaint?
I can't remember offhand, sorry, I can find out for you. But they're not, we don't get very many. No. And obviously in the annual report that we do in July, we always report if there are many, but they are really not doing it, which is good.
Would the compliments include the TripAdvisor comments that you get on visitor centres? It seemed to be quite low, in that they had an award, and part of the awards process is looking at your visibility on social media. So I'd be really surprised if the visitor centres didn't have many more compliments via TripAdvisor. No, we just record things that sort of come in specifically to us when somebody might, email in or write in or whatever to say, so you're right, it doesn't reflect everything. Doesn't reflect it's just social media. No, it's which would be very difficult to monitor, to be honest. So it's just trying to give a bit of a flavour of every sort of positive feedback that we get. Okay.
We have a recommendation that we as a committee consider the report, and we have. Thank you. All in favour? All in favour, unanimous. And there are no other business that I'm aware of.